Anyway, fortunately for me, I went with Michael Phillips, my lawyer, barrister, and his understudy, Naved Saeed, who's training to be a barrister. So three of us went down, and they had primed me beforehand. David, once you get in there, say no comment to every single question. So that's what happened. It was quite a long interview, uh, and all the time you see you've got these very friendly police women who come in with cups of tea. Meanwhile, you're being grilled as though like you're in some Kafkaesque country, you know. So you've got these really surreal situations of normality and kindness, like this. It's a contradiction. So we left, no bail, but under investigation. Well, we waited over 6 months, thinking that after 6 months, since I hadn't heard anything, it had been dropped. But a little bit more than so. That was in the let me see, that was the May. That was May. Then in December, I got this notification that I had to appear at Poole Magistrates for a first hearing. That would be 2024. Now, can I just go? I'm sure you have to roll back now because I said I'd sent an email to David Siddick, the Dorset Police Commissioner. He never saw it because his office worker, Yvonne Fennick, with the grand title of Governance and Communication Officer, she's the one who triages all his emails and she decides what he's going to read and what he's not going to read. She opened it. Shock, horror, screams and yells and cries and tears when she saw this. And she showed it to another woman, Brenda. I'd never heard of Brenda. Anyway, I discovered that both Fern Graham and Yvonne Fennick were now my accusers. And I was being accused of breaking the Malicious Communications Act of 1998, I think it is, and Section 127 of the Electronic Communications Act 2003. Now, these state that if you send anything which is alarming or distressing or offensive, you could go to prison for this. In fact, when I was in the court, the police prosecutor was pushing for me to have a 2-year prison sentence. I mean, can I just tell you that on the day that I went to the trial, which was on the 1st of May last year, I had to take a packed case with me. I didn't know whether I was coming home or not. So I brought this case, 6 pages of this, 6 pages of that. But anyway, so the first appearance in court was in January the 26th. 2 days later, or a day later, I was at the Holocaust Memorial Service in Wimborne, and lo and behold, there was David Siddick, the Dorset Police Commissioner. And I just happened to have the offending article that I'd sent him, hard copy, on me. So I ambushed him on his way out of the Minster, and he read it. And he didn't say, "Oh, this is disgusting. This is shocking." He said, "Oh," she said, "what you're seeking is a change in the law, isn't it?" I said, "Yes." I said, "Well," I said, "Do you?" I said, he said he'd never received it. I offered to send him an electronic version so that he could actually open up the links. And he said, "Oh, that won't be necessary." He says, "I shall find it." But what had happened was that Yvonne Fennick, when she submitted her witness statement, she had redacted David Siddick, dear David Siddick, as if I'd written to her. She went straight in on the letter. So, she's perverted the course of justice. She's tampered with the evidence. So these two, Fern Graham and Yvonne, anyway, over the next year, see till a bit more than that, to May the 1st, when I of 2025 last year, when I was in court, I had to go into court 10 times, which was very stressful. Driving there, the parking. And we even had a supposed trial in October, at the end of 2024. My lawyers came down. I had expert witnesses come down. I had a bloke, a very a good Christian man, drove on his motorbike from Devon. We had Christian Hacking in a wheelchair come down. I had about 12 or 15 people came down. We waited and waited all day long, only to be told by the usher, very sorry, Mr. Skinner, but too many people on the list, like driving offences or spitting, or something like that. But I was made to wait until it was too late. Oh, and not only that, we discovered that the magistrate didn't feel qualified. So this is a real eye opener into the court system, the total shambolic, the disgusting state of the court system. And you really wonder, is this deliberate? I mean, if it were deliberate, they couldn't have made it even more disreputable. So anyway, so 10 times before we went into the court on the 1st of May, I had to go back into the magistrate's court. By the way, all this took part in a magistrate's court. I had to go in with Michael Phillips, where we did some horse trading with the judge, Orla Austin. Orla Austin is a piece of work, a feminist, young. She's only been a judge for a year, wanting to make, get as many scalps hanging from her belt as possible. She was the one who did Connor Burns, Adam Smith. Sorry, not Connor Burns. No, not Connor Burns, please. Adam Smith Connor and Livia Tasiki Bolt. Livia Tasiki Bolt, by the way, got fined £22,000. Orla Austin, she was the one who, and she was the one who was going to accuse me. Michael Phillips tried to get her to recuse herself because of the link. She said, "Oh, there's no link at all." The other thing that he was wanting was my expert witnesses, Greg Gardner and Martin Parsons, experts in theology and abortion and experts in medicine. They said, "Oh, they're not expert." Even though these guys have got letters after them. No, they're not expert. They can say whatever they like. They've got the power. Then they spent a long time. I was in there 3 hours on that occasion. This must have been about March 2025. 3 hours sitting there at the back of the court, big court. And Michael Phillips and the police prosecutor then spent some time arguing about the authenticity of the photographs in the offending article I'd sent. Were they real? Were they doctored? Were they AI? A long time. And I was thinking back of the court, all you have to do, if you want to find out if these are real, go down to the clinic, intercept the boxes that come out from the clinic, open them up, and find out, are these tin cans? Are they dogs, cats? Are they fish bones? What are they? And they'd see that they're human beings, and how they ended up. But anyway, never mind. When we come to the actual court hearing on the 1st of May, Orla Austin has disappeared, only to be replaced by someone equally worse. It was a man this time, parachuted in from London, a district judge. Forgotten his name now, Michael something or other. We had, again, there's one of those occasions where we had to wait a long time. We kept hanging around. But anyway, it lasted an hour and a half, this court case. It was a Judge Jeffries thing. My two accusers, Yvonne Fennick and Fern Graham, turned up. Finally, I saw them face to face. At least I saw Fern Graham, who looked a rather, she appeared not in smart police uniform. She appeared in a kind of old shirt, like a naughty school child, going to school. Not exactly a shirt hanging out, but she looked as though she'd had a bad night. She looked a rough cookie, this woman. The other one, Yvonne Fennick, was allowed to stay behind a curtain because she was frightened of me. She was fearful of me. So I was made to appear to be a terrorist. And at one stage, oh yes, then at one stage she started blubbering, and a Kleenex box, was brought out. And I thought, well, why don't they hand them all round? Why can't we all have a good old blubber? I mean, it was a pantomime, this thing. But I mean, one of the worst things was this: that Michael Phillips could not make the case on that day. He was dealing with others. I mean, he's got fires raging around all the time. He's in heavy demand. Christians are being really persecuted, unbelievably. In his replacement was Roger Kiska. Roger Kiska is the supreme authority on human rights. Goes into the Supreme Court in Brussels or wherever it is, The Hague, or if you want to know anything about him, it is him. He flew all the way over from Slovakia, from Bratislava, all the way for my case. And the judge completely trashed him, treated him with contempt. It was unbelievable that day. And anyway, at the end of it, the judge said, well, he said, Mr. Skinner, he's 80 years of age. He's got no criminal record, and he's got profound Christian beliefs. And I thought, oh, this is going quite well. And then he said, however, he said, nowhere in his letter, his offending letter to police, does it indicate what he wants them to do. Clearly, all he wanted to do was to offend them, upset him. Whereas in black and white, I'm telling them, please investigate. The word investigate, you can't translate that any other way. Investigate the clinic. And then I went through this, all the evidence why they should investigate, and then said at the end, unless you do this, these atrocities will continue. So it was in black and white. Did I have to spell out to them? No, you've got to take a pathologist, you've got to take a coroner. Did I have to spell out to the police how they're supposed to do their job? And the basic job of the police, the very bottom line, is to protect life. That is their, if they don't do anything else, irrespective of policies, irrespective of ideology, that is what they're supposed to do. Which reminds me, the great pearl that dropped from this was that Fern Graham, in her delivery in court, she said, Mr. Skinner's beliefs go against my beliefs and my ideology. I thought, oh, thank you very much. What is that ideology? So the police are supposed to be impartial, apolitical, non-ideological, where she broke the rules of the Pelian principles. I then subsequently learned she had lied about Lorne Castle. He was still employed, and I think he was sacked the following year in 2024 for assaulting a 16-year-old boy. And then at the moment, this very moment, he's appearing in court again for violent behavior. So, I mean, he is typical of many. No, I shouldn't say that. I think the majority of policemen are good policemen. They're conscientious, but you've got maybe 25% rotten apples, and they're allowed to rule the roost. It's rotten. It's that minority at the top who are rotten.
In the final court case, what was the result?
Well, the final court case, we're talking about the 1st of May. I was fined. It started off like £2,500. Give £500 for that police officer and £500, and then in addition there was another £600 added on top of that. But when the bill came through my door, it was just shy of £4,000, about 120 pounds, nearly £4,000 I had to pay, um, and a criminal record. But I was actually sort of jubilant that I didn't mind paying that. It meant that I was going home that night to sleep with my wife, in my own bed. I sort of went with a very light step out of the court when you could see that what they were really wanting was to get this bloke and kill him, to rend him limb from limb. So that they could only go so far. God's restraining hand. So so anyway, but what had happened was that Michael Phillips has said to me, um, this was back in March when we'd sat for 3 hours before all at Austin. When we came out, Michael Phillips said, for them, this is personal. You will be found guilty. And he's going to start putting in an appeal straight away, even before we had the court case. Now, he put in, as soon as we came out, the appeal. Now, what I didn't know was if I went ahead with an appeal, what was that going to cost? And if I lost, would I lose my house? I was going through terrible, my wife and I were going through terrible marital, because of this, strains, and even talking about getting a divorce so that she wouldn't lose the house. That's the extreme that I would have to do. And I do remember we were at um, again in Wimborne Minster. We had a funeral service of a little boy, 3-year-old little boy, a Christian boy, who he was giving out tracts. He'd broken away from his parents, run across the road, and got killed outright by a lorry, a van. Wasn't traveling fast, but it killed him. We were in this Minster going, so we're in this service, and through my mind, I'm going through this turmoil about, do I press ahead? You know, what? And when we came out, it was a phone call from Michael Phillips and basically Andrew Minicilla when he used to say, David, don't worry, we will back you financially, but we want you to do this. So, what they wanted to do was for the appeal to go ahead. So we had the appeal. Um, when was it? The 23rd and the 24th of April. I can't believe it. I just lose track of dates. The time just whizzes past. But it wasn't that long ago. What are we now? Gosh, it was getting on
Yeah,
for
a month ago. Yep,
nearly,
yep.
nearly, it only seems like last week. Anyway, what happened was that turned up at Bournemouth Crown Court now. This is not Tuppenny Akeley stuff. It's not magistrate. Bournemouth Crown Court. And we had a High Court judge brought down from London. Again, this is not Tuppenny Akeley. He was a Sikh with a black turban and a red kind of tabard. This was serious stuff. And there were two other judges as well. So I had three judges. But before we went in, this is on the 23rd, Michael Phillips gave me the third degree. He was sort of like a headmaster shouting at a naughty pupil, saying, David, he said, you are uncontrollable. You just go off on a bender, shut up, be quiet, He says, speak when I speak to you, And when we were in the court, he says, I'll give you signals of when to shut up and when to. He was really, I mean, he gave me, in front of all the other, we had about 15 people turn up. So by the time I got into court, I was really sort of in fear and trembling. And then I had to take the stand. I stood for 2 hours. And the High Court judge, he said, Mr. Skinner, he said, what is the connection between your faith an abortion. And I started paraphrasing Genesis about how the way God created all things beautifully, everything was perfect. He then created mankind, the very pinnacle of his creation, how we were made in God's image, and how destroying the unborn baby that is just fresh from his hands, as it were, totally perfect and unblemished, to deliberately destroy that is a detestable abomination. You know. Anyway, I'm speaking like this now quite, rashly, but as soon as I started saying this, I started to break down. I could one word would hardly come after the other. I was just I can only call it the Holy Spirit came on me. I was I, I had a great difficulty stop bursting into tears saying this. Anyway, consequence was the judge could see that I was totally authentic in my beliefs. There was a strong connection between the two. I was then questioned by the senior Crown prosecutor. Now, as we know, these prosecutors are all babes of Keir Starmer, who used to run the Crown Prosecution Service. Totally corrupt and degenerate bunch of, at one time they were all in the pay of Stonewall. I think they've since Stonewall have gone trans, they sort of extended their franchise out into other businesses. They've, I think they've, but anyway, there's still a Ron. Anyway, he questioned me, and he was like a bit like Keir Starmer. Um, I would answer his question, but he wouldn't. He wouldn't. He either must have had bananas stuffed in his ears. He didn't. It wasn't the answer that he wanted. So he keep asking me the same question, and I've sort of got to the point where I say, "Look, can't you, can't you?" So that was that. That was done. Then Michael Phillips took control of questioning me. Basically, it was a controlled explosion. I had in front of me what they call a bundle. It's a huge dossier of all these, these documents. I thought, wow, how am I going to go through this? What he did was he skillfully opened up to the court my offending article, in particular, the links. All the links were bits of film or picture. And so what happened was on these pages, there was just one still. So he'd say, right, Mr. Skinner, turn to page 203. What is the meaning of that picture? When he thought I'd said enough, he'd say, right, turn to page 508. What's the meaning of that picture? And so on and so on. We went through. And it was absolutely superb. It was controlled. He he got me. It was like squeezing a lemon. I was the lemon, and he got out what he wanted. At the end of it, they could not. My my supporters, Michael, they couldn't believe how I'd done. They thought it was a kind of miracle that I'd been so clear and articulate and informed. I knew my stuff, um, details. Um, it was quite wonderful. But anyway, at the end of it, they said, "Well, we don't know how it's going to go tomorrow because that was then going to be the final verdict. That's the Friday, the 24th. Don't know how it's going to go." So we all turn up the next day, and I think it took about, I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes for the judge to finally come to his decision. And I could not understand a word of what I can never understand. I can't understand anything. I'm a bear of little brain. I'm dyslexic. I can't even understand you, Rodney. The questions. But anyway, I got a glimpse here and there. Odd word. I thought, really? Did he really say that? Anyway, at the end of it, Michael Phillips turned to me. He said, "David," he said, "you've won." And I felt a bit like Beethoven, when he was conducting his Ninth Symphony, when he was stone deaf, he had to be turned around and show the audience clapping. So that's basically, when we came out to the sunshine, cameras, and it was excellent stuff. But hats off to Michael Phillips, really. Um, I owe. I wouldn't have done it without him. I mean, he got out of me. He brilliant, skillful. Got out of me what he wanted.
One is reminded, David, in this that many people have been, you've used the word, I think correctly, persecuted, that have taken the Christian stance, whether it be speaking in the town square, and people who are anti-Christian, sometimes vehemently, have made false accusations just to get rid of that occasion. And the same thing has been happening to you over the years, but you stuck by it. And in the end, thanks to God's help in many, many ways, and to supporters, and to Christian Concern, one must say this, who are defending the Christians' right to speak in our very difficult country at the moment. And we're at the end of this. People have used things like words like invasion of our country, of our changing culture, and people were condemning it straight away. They're not condemning it quite so much these days. So this is a battle. It's a spiritual battle, if you like. The church doesn't always help. In fact, sometimes it's a hindrance. So we are very sympathetic of what you've been through, and you've stuck with it over the years. It's not something that you've had to worry about for a week. It's been years. And I think out of this will come a lot of good, David. Thank you so much for sharing what you've done and what you've experienced.
Just finish by saying, when I came out of the court, I said we don't just sit down and go around the campfire and smoke our pipe and drink camp coffee. We move on to the next objective. Or as Churchill said, was it now this is not the end, this is not even he said this is simply the end of the beginning. So, we've got to press on to the next objective. That's what we have to do. And I'm in the process now of writing a complaint to the police, and I'm going to demand that they put in the Daily Echo an apology, in public for their treatment of me. That's, but I can't let this pass like that. They can't just walk away and then do it again.
Many will agree with you, David. We wish you well. See you shortly.
Thank you.